I was putting the final signature on a $28 million deal when the email notification popped up on my phone. A message from my boss to the CEO saying, "Let Marcus close the Richardson deal, then we'll discuss his departure during restructuring." That's when I realized they planned to fire me the moment I delivered their biggest win, but what they didn't know was that the contract was still in my hands, and I was about to sign my own name instead of theirs. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I've spent the last 3 years being the invisible man at Richardson Tech Solutions. While my boss David Chun took credit for every major deal I closed, I kept my head down and did the work. That's just how corporate life goes, right? You climb the ladder one stolen idea at a time. But tonight felt different. The office was empty except for the security guard downstairs and me, hunched over my computer at 11:47 p.m., making final changes to the biggest contract our company had ever seen. $42 million with Global Industries, spread across 5 years. Every clause, every contingency, every risk assessment, all mine. David had left at 5:30, as usual, muttering something about dinner with clients. Funny thing about those client dinners, they never seemed to involve actual clients, just David's golf buddies from the country club. Meanwhile, I stayed behind to fix the legal language he'd butchered during his afternoon presentation. My phone buzzed on the desk. An email notification from David's account, sent to our CEO Harrison Webb. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the preview text visible on my lock screen. "Let Marcus close the Richardson deal, then we'll discuss his departure during restructuring." I stared at those words until they burned into my vision. My hands stopped moving across the keyboard. The humming of the office air conditioning suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. I unlocked my phone with trembling fingers and read the full email. David had sent it just 20 minutes ago, probably from whatever bar he was calling a client dinner. The message was short, casual, like he was discussing weekend plans instead of my career execution. "Harrison, Marcus doesn't know it yet, but we're moving forward with the downsizing plan we discussed. Let him finalize the Global Industries contract first. He's the only one who understands all the technical details. Once we have their signature, we can handle the transition during Q4 restructuring. The new junior associate can manage client relations moving forward. Much more cost-effective." David. Cost-effective. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends, reduced to a budget line item. I set the phone down carefully like it might explode. Around me, the office felt smaller, more suffocating. The motivational posters on the walls seemed to mock me. "Excellence is not a skill, it's an attitude." Yeah, right. But here's what David didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn despite 3 years of taking credit for my work. I hadn't signed the contract yet. That $42 million deal, he was counting on to secure his own promotion? It was sitting unsigned on my screen, waiting for my electronic signature. The contract that would make his career was still completely under my control. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at my laptop screen and that unsigned contract. Every time I almost convinced myself I'd misunderstood the email, I'd read it again. Much more cost-effective. The words felt like acid in my throat. By morning, pieces of a puzzle I'd been ignoring for months started clicking together. The hushed conversations that stopped when I walked into conference rooms. The way Harrison had been asking me to document all my client relationships for training purposes. David's sudden interest in my project files and password protocols. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While I worked myself to exhaustion, they'd been designing my replacement. I drove to the office on autopilot, my mind racing through 3 years of stolen moments. The Morrison account I'd saved from collapse while David was on vacation in the Bahamas. He'd returned to find a grateful client and a commission check, never asking how the crisis had been resolved. The Techfield merger I'd structured from scratch, only to watch David present it to the board as his own strategic vision. Every promotion I should have gotten. Every presentation I'd written but never delivered. Every client relationship I'd built but couldn't claim. Walking through the office lobby felt like entering a crime scene where I was both the victim and the only witness. Sharon at reception smiled her usual greeting. The security guard nodded like always. Nobody knew what I knew. Nobody saw what I could see now with perfect clarity. David was already at his desk when I arrived, typing furiously on his phone. Probably arranging another fake client dinner to celebrate my impending termination. He looked up and flashed that practiced smile that had once seemed friendly but now looked predatory. "Marcus, how'd the final review go last night? Please tell me we're ready to close this thing." I could have confronted him right there. Could have thrown the email in his face and demanded an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was 3 years of learning to stay quiet. Maybe it was the realization that anger wouldn't solve anything. Or maybe it was the idea forming in the back of my mind, dangerous and perfect. "Just a few more details to iron out," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Should have everything ready by end of day." His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Fantastic. Harrison's been breathing down my neck about this one. You know how it is." "No, David. I know how it should be." I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls, but not about the contract. Instead, I called Jennifer Park, the lawyer who'd helped me buy my condo 2 years ago. She specialized in employment law and had a reputation for eating corporate bullies for breakfast. "Independent contractor status," she said after reviewing my employment documents over lunch. "Interesting. No non-compete clause, no exclusivity agreement. You're not technically an employee, Marcus. You're a consultant they've been paying for 3 years. The implications hit me like lightning. If I wasn't really their employee, then the clients weren't really theirs either. That same afternoon, I found myself in Jennifer's law office, watching her face light up as she read through my contract history. She'd been quiet for 10 minutes, occasionally making notes or shaking her head in what looked like professional disbelief. "Marcus, this is either the most incompetent HR department I've ever seen, or they deliberately structured this to avoid paying you benefits," she said, setting down the papers. "Either way, it's about to backfire spectacularly." She explained that my contractor status meant I owned my client relationships, my methods, even my work processes. More importantly, Global Industries had been working directly with me for 8 months. Every email, every phone call, every negotiation, they'd been dealing with Marcus Sullivan, not Richardson Tech Solutions. "What are you thinking?" Jennifer asked, seeing the wheels turning in my head. "I'm thinking David just handed me the keys to his kingdom without realizing it." We spent 2 hours setting up Sullivan's strategic consulting. Business license, tax ID, bank account, all legitimate, all legal, all mine. Jennifer made sure every document was bulletproof. No loopholes, no gray areas, no way for Richardson Tech to claim ownership of what I was about to do. By 6 p.m., I had my own company. By 7 p.m., I had a plan that would turn David's betrayal into my liberation. But first, I needed to make one phone call. Robert Martinez speaking. The voice belonged to Global Industries CEO, a man I'd been working with directly for months while David took credit from the sidelines. "Mr. Martinez, this is Marcus Sullivan. I need to inform you of some changes regarding our contract." "Marcus, good to hear from you. Is everything on track for signing tomorrow?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, there's been a development. I'm no longer with Richardson Tech Solutions. I've started my own consulting firm, and I wanted to discuss transferring our agreement to my new company." Silence on the other end. Then, "Marcus, you've been our primary contact throughout this entire process. Honestly, we've barely spoken to anyone else at Richardson. If you're confident you can deliver the same level of service." "Better service, Mr. Martinez. Without the corporate overhead and bureaucracy. Send me the paperwork. If the terms are the same, we're interested in moving forward with you directly." After hanging up, I sat in my car outside Jennifer's office, hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the realization that I'd just taken the first step toward claiming what was rightfully mine. David thought he was firing a pushover employee tomorrow. Instead, he was about to discover he'd lost his biggest client and his most valuable asset in the same conversation. Walking into Richardson Tech the next morning felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone else was reading from the wrong script. David practically bounced over to my desk, that fake smile stretched wider than usual. "Big day, Marcus. Harrison wants to see us both in his office at 9 to celebrate the Global Industries signing. I've already prepared remarks for the company newsletter about our team's success." "Our team. Right." I nodded calmly and sat down at my computer, pulling up the original contract one last time. $42 million, spread across 5 years, with renewal options that could double that amount. The document that David thought would secure his promotion and my termination. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into Harrison's corner office carrying a folder and wearing the most professional smile I could manage. David was already there, practically vibrating with excitement. Harrison looked pleased but tired, like a man ready to check another box on his quarterly goals. "Marcus, David tells me we're ready to finalize the Global Industries deal," Harrison said, gesturing for me to sit. "This is exactly the kind of win we need heading into Q4. "Absolutely," I replied, setting my folder on his desk. "Which is why I wanted to personally deliver some important news." David's smile faltered slightly. Harrison leaned forward, suddenly alert. I opened the folder and pulled out 2 documents. The first was a printout of David's email about my departure during restructuring. The second was my resignation letter, effective immediately. "I'm submitting my resignation from Richardson Tech Solutions," I said, my voice steady and professional. "And I wanted you both to know that Global Industries has agreed to transfer their contract to my new consulting firm." The silence that followed was absolute. David's face went through several colors before settling on a pale gray. Harrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" David finally managed. "You can't just. The contract belongs to Richardson Tech." "Actually, David, it doesn't." I turned to Harrison. "As you'll see in your own HR files, I've been classified as an independent contractor for 3 years. No employment agreement, no non-compete clause, no exclusivity requirement. My client relationships belong to me." Harrison grabbed his phone and started dialing. "Get legal up here now," he barked to whoever answered. David found his voice again, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Marcus, this is highly irregular. We can work something out. Maybe discuss that promotion we've been considering." I almost laughed. The promotion he'd been considering was apparently my termination. "There's nothing to work out, David. Global Industries was working with me, not Richardson Tech. They've been emailing me directly for months. Every proposal, every revision, every negotiation went through my personal channels because you were always too busy with your client dinners." The door burst open and Margaret Walsh from legal rushed in, looking like she'd run up 4 flights of stairs. Harrison thrust my resignation letter at her. "Can he do this? Can he just take our biggest client?" Margaret scanned the document, then looked at me with something that might have been respect. "If he's been classified as a contractor, and if the client relationship was primarily with him personally," she shrugged. "It's not our client anymore." David slammed his hand on Harrison's desk. "This is theft. Industrial espionage. We'll sue you for everything you're worth." I stood up calmly, straightening my tie. "With what evidence, David? That I took clients who preferred working with me over working with you? That I delivered better service than Richardson Tech could provide? Good luck explaining to a judge why that's illegal." Margaret was still reading through paperwork, her expression growing more grim by the minute. "Harrison, we need to talk privately. There are some significant liability issues here." As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. David sat slumped in his chair, staring at the wall like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Harrison was furiously typing on his phone, probably calling his own boss to explain how they just lost $42 million. "Oh, and David?" I said, my hand on the doorknob. "Global Industries asked me to thank you for introducing us. They're very happy with the transition." The last thing I heard as the door closed was David's voice, cracking slightly. How did he know about the email? Some questions, I decided, were better left unanswered. 3 days after walking out of Richardson Tech, my phone rang at 7:23 a.m. with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a familiar voice nearly made me drop my coffee. "Marcus, this is Patricia Williams from Morrison Industries. I've been trying to reach you through Richardson Tech for weeks, but they keep giving me the runaround. Someone finally told me you'd started your own firm." Patricia was the client whose account I'd saved 2 years ago when their previous consultant had botched a crucial merger. I'd worked 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight, rebuilding their entire integration strategy while David took a planned vacation to Cancun. When he returned, he'd presented my work to the board and collected a $20,000 bonus. "I need to be direct with you, Marcus," Patricia continued. "We've been unhappy with Richardson Tech's service for months. Ever since you stopped being our primary contact, everything's gone downhill. We want to move our contract to your new company." Before I could respond, she dropped a bombshell that made my heart race. "And Marcus? We're not the only ones. I've been talking to Robert Martinez at Global Industries, and he mentioned 3 other companies that have been asking about you. Word travels fast in our industry." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Patricia's account was worth $12 million over 3 years. Combined with Global Industries, I was looking at $54 million in contracted revenue before my company was even a week old. But the calls didn't stop there. By noon, I'd heard from Stephen Park at Technologic Solutions, asking about transferring their $8 million infrastructure project. By 3 p.m., Amanda Foster from Healthcare Dynamics wanted to discuss moving their entire consulting relationship to Sullivan Strategic. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd been working with me personally for months or years. David had been largely absent from their accounts, showing up only for signing ceremonies and photo opportunities. When they'd tried to reach me through Richardson Tech after my departure, they'd been stonewalled or redirected to junior associates who knew nothing about their project. The most satisfying call came at 4:47 p.m. "Marcus, this is James Sullivan from Premier Financial Group. No relation, despite the shared last name. I just got off the phone with Harrison Webb at Richardson Tech. He was trying to convince me that their company could handle our portfolio review without you. I told him I'd rather work with the person who actually understood our business. James had been my client for 18 months. I'd restructured their entire risk management system, saving them over $3 million in potential losses. David had attended exactly 2 meetings in all that time, both of them social events where he could network. Harrison seemed desperate. James continued with obvious amusement. He offered me a 20% discount to stay. When I told him I was moving to your firm regardless of price, he actually hung up on me. That evening, I calculated the numbers on my laptop. 7 major clients had committed to transferring their contracts to Sullivan Strategic. Total value, $86 million over the next 4 years. Revenue that Richardson Tech had thought was locked in permanently was walking out their door, following me to my one-man operation. But the real revelation came in an unexpected phone call at 8:15 p.m. "Marcus, this is Sarah Martinez, Robert's daughter. I work in business development at Global Industries." Her voice was tentative, almost apologetic. "My father asked me to call you directly. We've been reviewing our contract history with Richardson Tech, and we discovered something troubling." She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "For the past 18 months, Richardson Tech has been billing us for senior consultant hours on your project. Premium rates, justified by your expertise and track record. But according to their internal communications, they've been paying you contractor wages the entire time. They've been pocketing the difference. The math hit me like a physical blow. Richardson Tech had been charging clients senior consultant rates of $300 per hour for my work, while paying me contractor rates of $75 per hour. For 18 months. On multiple projects, they hadn't just stolen credit for my work. They'd been literally stealing money that clients had paid specifically for my services. Sarah, I said, my voice carefully controlled, would your company be willing to document those billing discrepancies? Already done. My father thought you should know what kind of people you'd been working for. After hanging up, I called Jennifer Park and explained what I'd learned. Her response was immediate and decisive. Marcus, that's not just unethical. It's fraud. Richardson Tech has been misrepresenting their cost structure to clients while underpaying the person actually doing the work. We're filing complaints with the State Attorney General's office and the Better Business Bureau first thing Monday morning. As I sat in my empty apartment that night, surrounded by moving boxes and the detritus of my old life, I realized something profound had shifted. 3 days ago, I'd been an invisible employee about to be discarded. Now I was a business owner with more contracted revenue than Richardson Tech's entire quarterly target. David's plan to use me and discard me had backfired so spectacularly that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 6 months later, I stood in my new office overlooking downtown, reading a newspaper article that made me smile despite myself. Richardson Tech Solutions files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection was the headline, with a photo of Harrison Webb looking haggard outside a courthouse. The article detailed how the company had lost over $90 million in contracted revenue after key personnel departures and was facing multiple fraud investigations related to billing practices. David Chen, the article noted, had been terminated for cause and was facing potential criminal charges. My assistant knocked on the door, interrupting my reading. "Mr. Sullivan? There's a David Chen here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal. I'd been expecting this visit for weeks. Send him in." David walked into my office looking like a shadow of his former self. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He'd lost weight, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same position I'd occupied countless times in his office. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I suppose you're here to tell me this was all a misunderstanding," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He shook his head slowly. "No. I'm here to apologize. And to ask if there might be any way you could use a consultant. I know it's presumptuous, but I'm facing some serious legal bills, and no one in the industry will return my calls." The man who had planned to fire me after stealing credit for my biggest deal was now begging for work. 3 years of suppressed anger should have made this moment sweet, but instead, I felt something unexpected: pity. "David, you spent 3 years taking credit for my work while planning to discard me the moment it became convenient. You defrauded clients by charging them premium rates for my services while paying me contractor wages. You cost Richardson Tech $90 million and destroyed dozens of careers because you couldn't stand the idea of sharing credit." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I know all of that. I was scared, Marcus. Scared that if people knew how good you were, they'd realize how mediocre I was. So I tried to keep you invisible while taking everything you built. For the first time in our entire relationship, David was being completely honest. No charm, no manipulation, just raw truth about his own insecurity and moral failures. "The worst part," he continued, "is that I convinced myself I deserved it. That somehow my position gave me the right to claim your achievements. I was wrong about everything, and now I'm paying the price. I leaned back in my chair, studying the broken man across from me. 6 months ago, he'd held all the power. Now he was unemployable, facing potential prison time, and reduced to begging his former victim for mercy. David, I can't offer you a job. The legal liability alone would destroy everything I've built. But I can give you something else. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a business card for Jennifer Park's law firm. Jennifer specializes in employment law, but she also handles criminal defense. Tell her I referred you. She'll work with you on payment terms, and she's good enough to keep you out of prison if you're completely honest with her. He took the card with shaking hands. Why would you help me after everything I did? Because destroying you won't undo the damage you caused, and it won't make me a better person. Sometimes the best revenge is just being successful enough that your enemies become irrelevant. After David left, I returned to the newspaper article. The final paragraph mentioned that Sullivan Strategic Consulting had been named the fastest-growing firm in the region, with projected revenue of over $200 million in the coming year. I folded the paper and set it aside, then opened my laptop to review proposals for 3 new major clients who had contacted me that week. All of them had heard about my work through referrals from existing clients, the kind of organic growth that no amount of stolen credit could replicate. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Martinez at Global Industries. Marcus, the board approved the contract extension. 5 more years, $300 million total. Congratulations on building something exceptional. I smiled and typed back, thank you for believing in authenticity over politics. Outside my window, the city hummed with activity. Somewhere out there, other talented people were probably being overlooked, undervalued, or betrayed by bosses who prioritized politics over performance. But they didn't have to stay invisible forever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something so successful that your former oppressors become footnotes in your success story.